Welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm so glad you're here. We are continuing today our series on joy, on happiness. And today we're going to take a foray into philosophy, one that helps us build the mental habits that bring us happiness. Okay, so we've all heard about muscle memory. And what is that? You haven't ridden a bike in 30 years. You get on and there you are. You may be a bit wobbly at first, but you are going down the street. You haven't played tennis in a while. You pick up a tennis racket and you remember how to hold it. Your serve comes back. It may not be the best, but at least it's there. And you can play the game even though you haven't played in years. You remember the physical aspects of performing these activities. You may not have done them in years, but somehow some part of your brain remembers. We have trained our mind through repetition. We can also train our minds without actually performing the activity. Cellist Yo-Yo Ma once said that practicing is not only playing your instrument either by yourself or rehearsing with others, it also includes imagining yourself practicing. Your brain forms the same neural connections and muscle memory whether you are imagining the task or actually doing it. That is amazing stuff. It is amazing what our minds are capable of. So here's a wonderful example that I really like. Colonel George Hall was a U.S. pilot during the Vietnam War. In 1965, he was shot down over North Vietnam, and he was held as a prisoner of war for 8 years by the North Vietnamese. During those 8 years, he maintained his sanity and his hope by visualizing himself playing golf. And not just visualizing, he honed his skills of mental visualization beyond anything we can imagine. He developed in his mind a virtual golf course, 18 holes. Every aspect, the greens, the sand traps, the hills, where it turned, every aspect of this golf course. Every day, he imagined himself getting ready to play golf. He imagined himself getting dressed, putting on his shoes, his socks, his shirt, his pants, everything about getting dressed for the game of golf. Then he went to play, and he imagined the smallest detail. He played each hole. He felt the heat, the wind. He saw the sand. He felt the club in his hand. He heard the sound of the club hitting the ball. He would see the ball fly and land and roll, and he would walk to the next ball and hit it. It was the detail that he imagined was breathtaking. Every day when he got out, he went to actually play golf, and after a couple weeks he was shooting a 76, which was his handicap before he went in. And he did it entirely because during his captivity, he exercised his mind and maintained his muscle memory of how to play that game simply by mental visualization. Training our minds can change everything if we do it with discipline and with focus. It's why we here at One World emphasize practice. Using the power of our minds to bring us lives of peace and balance involves working at it daily. We can have those epiphanies, those satori moments, those aha moments, and they are wonderful. But if we want to build any habit that carries us over the rough spots, over the challenges, it involves daily practice. If you can't do it every day, as often as possible, but there are no shortcuts. So today, I want to talk about a philosophy that gives us some wonderful tools to practice ways to improve our lives. I want to share some thoughts with you on the Greek Stoics. I love the Stoics. About once a year, maybe more often, I give a talk on Stoicism because it's such a wonderful practice, and it's such a wonderful philosophy. It is practical, it is comprehensive, and you begin to see its benefits immediately. So, Stoicism was founded around 330 BCE by the philosopher Zeno. There are some great stories on how Zeno came to found Stoicism, including things like Zeno was a merchant, he got shipwrecked, he lost his entire fortune, and as a result of that, he was given the opportunity to do something else. And so he wandered whatever town he was in, and he listened to some philosophers, and he founded this philosophy. He took students, and he was off to the races. Now, why is it called Stoicism? Because Zeno initially, and other Stoics following, initially would practice this philosophy on porches. They would sit on the porch and they would talk to whoever came by. In Greek, stoa means porch. So the Stoics were philosophers who sat on their porches and would expound this philosophy with anybody who came by. Some of its more famous practitioners have been the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who wrote Meditations, the statesman Seneca, tutor of Nero, and the slave known as Epictetus. So one of the books that I used for this talk is Massimo Pigliucci's How to Be a Stoic. It is a great, if you will, kind of a beginner's book on Stoicism. It contains the basic principles. He styled it as a conversation with Epictetus, and it's wonderfully entertaining. I really recommend it. It's Massimo Pigliucci's How to Be a Stoic. So, as a supremely pragmatic group, Stoics believed that the goal of any philosophy is to enable us to live a happy life. It's not to make us sound smart. It's not to teach us a lot of long words. It's so that we can live a happy life individually and in community. Indeed, they said, if your philosophy does not lead you into living a happy life, get another one. Bag it. It doesn't work. Find one that leads you into living a happy life. Any useful philosophy must fit our nature as human beings, as rational human beings, or it's of no use. The Stoics saw our reason as our saving faculty, and their practices teach us how we can discipline it and develop it. So let's talk for a second about reason. The concept of reason in spiritual circles sometimes gets a bad rap. We think of it as dry. We think of it as non-spiritual. We think of it as limiting, because using our reason keeps us from developing that deeper consciousness. It stops us from operating out of our heart space. I'm spiritual, I'm not rational. I hope we don't set up such a false dichotomy. We would be adrift as human beings without our rational ability. It's our reason that helps us organize and understand our emotions, our experiences, other people. Our reason, it persuades us of the utility of peace over conflict, virtue over venality. It convinces us, it helps us understand what benefits us as human beings. Our rational ability and our hearts have to inform and balance each other, and that in fact may be the essence of a balanced life. The Stoics believed that nature gave us the ability to reason, and our lives improve when we train it and we use it well. It sounds simple, but it's really, like most other useful things, it's a lifelong task. We are not born knowing how to do this. We're born giving the tools to learn it, but we are not born knowing how to do it. We have to practice it and work at it, and that is the work of philosophy. So, what is this philosophy and what does it do for us? First, let's talk about what it isn't. If you go up to anybody on the street and ask them what a Stoic is, they're going to say it is someone who does not show emotion, somebody who doesn't cry when they cut their finger, whatever their example. It's somebody who is very close with their emotions. That is not it. Stoics have emotions and they show them and are thoroughly engaged in all aspects of life. However, what the philosophy does is it gives us practical tools so that our emotions don't run us, so that they don't run away with our lives. Instead, we cultivate awareness and clarity and mental tranquility, even in the midst of emotion, even in the midst of chaos. As they said, the winds may howl, but I will not be swept away. I love that. The winds may howl, but I will not be swept away. What a great image. The other great thing about Stoicism is that it is available to everyone. It is available to all of us. It doesn't require any belief in the divine, in any ultimate power. You can be a believer, an agnostic, an atheist. It doesn't matter. Or anything in between. It doesn't matter. The Stoics, by and large, believed that the universe could be understood by reason, and that this universal reason, or the energy they called logos, was apparent in everything, in inanimate matter, in the changes of the season, in all of creation, in us. There was nothing paranormal. The closest image that comes to mind is Einstein's conception of God, which he got from Spinoza. Einstein would look out at creation, at the movement of the planets and the operation of gravity and time, and decided that the notion of an anthropomorphic God just had no place. Instead, he saw a God that operated through the laws of nature that he was discovering. God was nature. All of creation was divine intelligence, continually unfolding and continually becoming. In 1954, he said, "I do not believe in a personal God. If something is in me which can be called religious, then it is the unbounded admiration for the structure of the world, so far as our science can reveal it." He later said, "I believe in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the orderly harmony of what exists, not in a God who concerns himself with the fates and the actions of human beings." To the extent many Stoics saw a divine presence at all, if you can call it that, it was confirmed in the operation of our reason. They saw it when they looked at the divine dance. The first lesson Stoicism teaches us, which we know here well at One World, is to put our effort, focus, and energy on those things we can control and forget the rest. As Epictetus said, we must make the best of those things that are in our power and take the rest as nature gives us. So where else do we see this? In so many faith traditions. Look at the most ancient, one of the Hindu traditions. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord Krishna, instructing Arjuna, teaches you have the right to your actions, but not to the fruits of your actions. You have the right only to what you can control, but you must not focus on the result. Detaching from outcomes is so easy to say, but it is so tough to do. That's why I'm mentioning it here, even though we so often talk about it here at One World. We've had many talks and speakers sharing this lesson. Think of Brian Perry and his hula hoop. It's a wonderful visual for the extent of control that we have. It is a good lesson to be reminded of, and we need to keep being reminded. Every day gives me examples, small and not so small, of how I continually forget it, how I worry about things over which I have no impact. Think about your life. Think about your week. Think about today as you sit here on Sunday morning or whenever it is you're listening to this. What have you worried about today, which is completely outside your control? I do it all the time. The analogy Epictetus gives us is that of a ship's journey. And it's a very good one. When he chooses to set out on a journey, what is it he can control? He can select the ship and make sure it is seaworthy. He can choose the pilot and choose the best one that he can. He can select the best time to travel, looking at the weather, making sure that it's going to be a smooth journey as much as he can figure that out. That's it. Whether he makes it to the other shore depends on so many factors beyond his control. He can impact what he can impact, but he cannot tell. A storm may blow up. Something may happen to the ship. The pilot may be sick and we have to pick somebody else who's not as good. The winds may not blow. There is no way to know all the variables that can impact this journey. And so what he says is, why spend energy on eventualities you cannot affect? You have done all you can. Put your energy where it can make a difference and don't waste time focusing on what you can't control. Just give it no energy. And actually, when you try this, and I have tried it, it is a very liberating thing. It sounds like something we can't do. I just worry and I'm just going to keep worrying. Yes, you can. With practice, yes, you can. Because what it does is it encourages you to put your energy on what you can control. And the good news is that we control entirely what is the most important, how we choose to see and respond to our world, how we show up. That's what we call it now. If I were a Stoic, I would say how well I demonstrate my character and what they called virtue. In short, it's how we show up, but those are the terms they used. Character and virtue. Now, it's not virtue as we use it now in kind of a religious sense. The term virtue as we think of it now is quite different from the way the Stoics meant it. Pigliucci writes that the Stoics got their understanding of virtue from Socrates, who really based it more in the concept of wisdom. The application and the development of wisdom in all aspects of our lives. He called wisdom the chief good in helping us to live in harmony internally and with each other. Our character, our courage, our perseverance, our judgment determines how we respond to the circumstances of our lives. So even though we cannot control how the events spin out, the Stoics give us constructive ways to think about and navigate what we can control and to conceptualize and deal with what we cannot. They put the focus on us, not on the winds that swirl around us. They give us a wonderful way to think about how we make this distinction. And this is the concept they use. The circumstances of our lives are what the Stoics call indifference. We have preferred indifference, which are good circumstances. This is me winning the lottery. And we have dispreferred indifference, which are circumstances which are not so good. This is something bad happening. This is losing a business, losing a job, losing a relationship, becoming sick. Preferred indifference and dispreferred indifference. It doesn't mean, now using the word indifferent doesn't mean that we are indifferent to it. That is not what he's talking about. It just means that whatever these circumstances are, they have no impact on how we choose to respond to them. So let's use the image of a ball in sports. Okay, when a game is being played, there's a ball being thrown, there's a ball being hit, and the ball is the indifferent. It's not the ball that's important, but the skill we employ in using it. It's the skill that makes us win or lose, not the item itself. Epictetus used the example of the ball in terms of the life of Socrates, and this is how he put it. Socrates was like one playing at ball. What then was the ball that he played with? Again, the ball is the indifferent. So what was the ball he played with? Life, imprisonment, exile, taking poison, being deprived of his wife, leaving his children orphans. These were the things he played with, but nonetheless, he played and tossed the ball with balance. So we ought to play the game, so to speak, with all possible care and skill, but treat the ball itself as indifferent. We play the ball with skill or we don't. And even if we play with extraordinary skill, we sometimes lose. It doesn't matter. Our job is whatever that indifferent is, positive or not. Our job is to bring our skill to it, whatever the ball is. No matter our circumstances, our response is entirely within our control. So, although we know this truth, how often do we still worry about pretty much everything? Those we love may get sick, we may lose a job or suffer some other reversals. Events in our world will lead to chaos or tragedy. So what do the Stoics teach us here? They say, yes, all these things may happen. That is true. That is clear seeing. So because their system of philosophy is eminently practical, they give us another discipline to prepare ourselves so that we are not swept away. The first practical tool, as I've said, is to be very clear about what we control and what we don't. Put your energy where it makes a difference. Second, they urge us to face the possibilities head on. We do not put our head in the sand. We face the possibilities head on. In a practice they call premeditatio malorum, or meditating on evil and troubles. They encourage us to consider the outcomes we fear calmly and intentionally. We review all the possibilities so that if one occurs, we are not taken by surprise. We are ready. Other traditions do this as well. Faith traditions or not, they encourage us, if there is something that we fear, to just look at it. If it happens, we are ready. Seneca wrote, "What is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster. This is a reason for ensuring that nothing ever takes us by surprise. We should project our thoughts ahead of us at every turn, and have in mind every possible eventuality, instead of only the usual course of events. Rehearse them in your mind. Exile, torture, war, shipwreck, all the terms of our human lot should be before our eyes." When we do that, when we have sat with what might actually happen, we move through the fear. It helps us move through the fear to a place of clarity. When we are clear, we become aware that if it happens, we can get through it. Conversely, if it doesn't happen, we have cause for gratitude about the blessings in our lives. Everything turned out well. The ship made it. The crop didn't fail. We lived. Our family member recovered. It could have been otherwise. This ability to be ruthlessly clear about the fragility of life enabled Stoic practitioners to draw all the more joy from it. Every moment mattered. Life can be short. Live it with joy in the moment and gratitude for all we have right now. Third, they teach us to carefully and clearly examine what is actually going on without being diverted by assumptions or fears. Okay, that's not easy, because if you're like me, you are constantly wandering into the land of assumptions and fears. Epictetus here said, "Don't let the force of an impression, when it first hits you, knock you off your feet. Just say to it, 'Hold on a moment, let me see who you are and what you represent. Let me put you to the test.'" So when something happens, we take a moment, we step back, and we say, "What is here?" We are aware of what we are telling ourselves about this event. What am I feeling? What am I telling myself happened? Am I correct? Did it really happen? Look at what is happening in all its aspects. We don't put our heads down, afraid to look, but being preoccupied by what we fear this thing is. Seneca knew this, and he said, "Some things torment us more than they ought. Some torment us before they ought, and some torment us when they ought not to torment us at all." We are in the habit of exaggerating or imagining or anticipating sorrow. Mark Twain put it this way. He said, "My life has been filled with tragedies, most of which never happened." How our lives are improved when we can lift our heads and see clearly what is going on around us. Don't anticipate troubles. Okay, I can see those people who know me well just laughing hysterically at this point. But that's why they call it practice. Yes, I do this. I do this a lot. But that's why they call it practice. It is a mental discipline. And I have to tell you, these Stoic precepts helped me do it less. Next, they teach us to see the gift in all of life, not to love the good news and avoid the bad, but to be grateful for all of it. The Stoic principle embodied here is what they call amor fati, or love of fate. Our lives are enriched by all of it and are diminished when we turn away or hide from adversity. We welcome life as it happens, all of it, all of it. The Stoics believed that the events coming at us are our greatest teachers, and challenges in life are not to be tolerated, but are to be welcomed. Love of fate. As Marcus Aurelius put it, a blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it. All that life hands us is an opportunity to learn more about how to live with character, with virtue, and what the Stoics saw really as integrity. Everything that happens to us is the ability to know what we can weather. Remember that the goal is to live a life that is happy. We cannot be happy if we are upended by every challenge or difficulty, if we fall victim to fear. Challenges, they teach us, even disasters are going to happen. The bedrock of our happiness, our peace, must be founded on our ability to weather these events. As Seneca said, I judge you unfortunate because you have never lived through misfortune. You have passed through life without an opponent. No one can ever know what you are capable of, not even you. Now, this is tough stuff to hear, welcoming challenges, navigating successfully through disasters, but that's why they call these tools practice, because these things are going to happen and they help us navigate them, they help us get through them. Epictetus gives us a wonderful image for navigating life's difficulties, and it's one I refer to frequently, I use frequently personally. He taught that everything has two handles, the one by which it may be carried, the other by which it cannot. If your brother acts unjustly, don't lay hold of the action by the handle of his injustice, for by that it cannot be carried, but by the opposite, that he is your brother, that he was brought up with you, and thus you will lay hold of it as it is to be carried. I love that. Every event has two handles, and we get to pick which one we pick it up by. We get to choose which handle we will grasp when approaching any life challenge, the one that leads to anger or fear, or the one that leads to appreciation and growth. Ask yourself. Every situation has two, and we have the freedom to choose. The Stoics teach us that life can be more. They teach us that yes, events happen, but we do not need to be buffeted here and there by the winds that inevitably blow. They give us practices that will help us, even though the winds blow, we will not be swept away. So I encourage you to learn more about this philosophy. There are so many current resources. Stoicism has really enjoyed kind of a rebirth. There are so many. There are TED Talks, there are books. I really encourage you to look into it. It is a wonderful philosophy for helping us live lives of peace and balance and joy. So, thank you so much for listening. And remember, however the winds howl, we will not be swept away. Thank you.